When Detective Victoria Kane became Chicago PD's most decorated investigator, citizens trusted her to solve the city's most dangerous crimes. But when her gambling addiction and evidence theft schemes consumed her, she began stealing drugs from crime scenes and murdering officers who discovered her crimes, turning the evidence locker into a deadly criminal operation. Before starting the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the video. The Illinois winter wind cut through Chicago's police headquarters as Detective Victoria Kane organized stolen evidence bags and criminal organization payment records for what would become the most dangerous investigation of her 19-year career as the Midwest's most experienced homicide detective and evidence specialist. At 53 years old, Victoria had established herself as Chicago PD's premier investigator, controlling major criminal cases and evidence processing that attracted organized crime families, drug dealers, and corrupt attorneys who valued her detective authority and her reputation for coordinating the most sensitive criminal investigations affecting law enforcement outcomes and evidence integrity throughout the metropolitan police system. Victoria's detective office occupied the investigative wing of Chicago Police Department's downtown headquarters, featuring evidence storage systems, criminal case coordination facilities, and witness protection centers that allowed her to oversee the department's most critical investigations while maintaining absolute control over criminal evidence worth millions and case outcomes affecting law enforcement credibility and criminal justice proceedings throughout the regional court system. The interior of Victoria's office reflected her mastery of criminal investigation and her understanding of law enforcement expectations for both investigative excellence and absolute integrity during the most critical criminal justice procedures affecting public safety, featuring walls displaying detective commendations from multiple police administrations, photographs of successful case closures, and testimonials from grateful crime victims whose cases had been solved through her investigative expertise and strategic criminal analysis affecting law enforcement effectiveness and criminal justice outcomes. But beneath Victoria's reputation for investigative excellence lay a dangerous combination of compulsive gambling addiction, systematic evidence theft, and calculated murder that had transformed her police operations into criminal enterprises, where threatening officers and suspicious investigators met their fate through evidence tampering and witness elimination during vulnerable criminal investigations and evidence procedures. "Good morning, Detective Kane," said Sergeant James Martinez, arriving for his weekly case briefing about ongoing homicide investigations and federal coordination that required Victoria's authorization for evidence processing and witness protection affecting criminal case outcomes. James had recently discovered irregular evidence handling procedures and had begun questioning Victoria's explanations about processing protocols that seemed to bypass normal police oversight processes and federal evidence security requirements. "Good morning, Sergeant Martinez," Victoria replied with the law enforcement authority and investigative expertise that had made her legendary among Chicago police personnel, who viewed her as both criminal justice specialist and evidence coordinator, capable of solving complex criminal cases through sophisticated investigation techniques and strategic evidence analysis affecting law enforcement success and criminal prosecution throughout the police department. James had become Victoria's most dangerous subordinate, not because of his demanding investigative requirements or her federal coordination responsibilities, but because of his recent discovery of unauthorized evidence removals and his growing awareness of the theft operation that Victoria had been conducting while supposedly providing legitimate criminal investigation services for police cases and evidence management programs. What James didn't know was that Victoria had been systematically stealing drugs from evidence storage and murdering police personnel for over 3 years, using her detective authority and access to criminal evidence to coordinate drug theft operations while eliminating anyone who discovered her evidence crimes or threatened to expose her criminal exploitation of police resources for organized crime coordination and evidence trafficking affecting criminal justice integrity and law enforcement credibility. Victoria's transformation from respected detective to calculating killer had begun 5 years earlier, when her compulsive gambling addiction had escalated from occasional casino visits to during off-duty hours to daily dependency that consumed her substantial detective salary and forced her into relationships with organized crime figures who offered enormous payments for stolen police evidence and criminal case information affecting law enforcement investigations and criminal prosecution outcomes. Her addiction cost over $7,000 per day, while her access to Chicago PD's comprehensive evidence storage provided unprecedented opportunities for coordinating theft operations that generated millions through stolen drugs and criminal evidence affecting organized crime operations and law enforcement investigation integrity throughout the police department. Her criminal activities escalated when several police officers and internal affairs personnel discovered evidence of unauthorized evidence access and threatened to report their suspicions to police oversight agencies and federal law enforcement organizations investigating corruption targeting, criminal evidence, and law enforcement integrity throughout Chicago police operations. Victoria murdered her first victim, a suspicious evidence technician who detected irregular storage access patterns, by orchestrating a traffic accident using organized crime assets that appeared to be vehicular incident rather than premeditated assassination designed to protect evidence theft operations. The success of her first murder convinced Victoria that eliminating threatening police personnel and suspicious oversight investigators was both necessary for protecting her theft operation and achievable given her complete detective authority and her ability to coordinate with criminal organizations who could stage police accidents and eliminate witnesses while providing plausible cover stories involving law enforcement hazards and police operational dangers. Over the following 3 years, Victoria murdered 10 additional individuals using various organized crime methods and police coordination that took advantage of her detective authority, her access to criminal networks during vulnerable investigations, and her ability to stage deaths as police accidents or criminal targeting that occurred during routine law enforcement activities with personnel who had access to sensitive information that could expose evidence theft operations. Her victims had been carefully selected based on their discovery of her criminal activities, their potential cooperation with police authorities, or their knowledge of evidence procedures that could expose her criminal coordination and systematic theft of police evidence affecting law enforcement oversight and criminal justice compliance. Her victims included Officer Patricia Williams, a police evidence specialist who had discovered evidence of systematic theft and whose precinct consultation had resulted in fatal equipment malfunction staged by criminal assets during routine evidence processing. Detective David Foster, who had reported suspicious evidence activities and whose Chicago PD meeting had ended in fatal gang targeting using weapons obtained through criminal networks. And Agent Jennifer Martinez, a federal police oversight investigator who had been tracking evidence crimes and whose police headquarters inspection had resulted in fatal exposure to concentrated drugs disguised as police evidence contamination affecting federal oversight of law enforcement operations. The evidence theft operation had become extraordinarily sophisticated, with Victoria coordinating the systematic removal of drugs and valuable evidence from police storage through carefully planned theft procedures and criminal organization coordination that provided access to stolen police evidence for organized crime operations and drug trafficking, affecting law enforcement investigation integrity and criminal justice proceedings. Major drug seizures served as primary theft operations, with Victoria personally coordinating the removal and sale of narcotics and valuable evidence to organized crime figures, seeking access to police evidence for criminal protection and law enforcement investigation, compromise affecting criminal prosecution outcomes and police operation security throughout the department. The most disturbing aspect of the operation was the systematic compromise of criminal investigations and court proceedings, with Victoria coordinating with organized crime figures to steal critical evidence and case information that protected criminal defendants and undermined law enforcement prosecutions, affecting criminal justice outcomes and police investigation effectiveness. Multiple criminal cases had been compromised as direct result of Victoria's evidence theft operations, with serious criminal prosecutions failing due to missing evidence and corrupted investigation procedures that served organized crime interests rather than criminal justice, affecting law enforcement credibility and public safety throughout Chicago's criminal justice system. Detective Kane, I need to discuss serious concerns about evidence theft and reports of police corruption connected to your criminal investigation operations, said FBI Special Agent Sarah Rodriguez of the Bureau's Public Corruption Division, arriving at Victoria's office carrying federal warrants to inspect her evidence procedures and interview her about suspicious police activities. Special Agent Rodriguez specialized in investigating law enforcement crimes and had developed expertise in recognizing patterns of evidence theft and police corruption affecting law enforcement operations throughout police departments. Special Agent Rodriguez's investigation represented an existential threat to Victoria's criminal operation, as her federal corruption expertise and access to police crime databases could expose the systematic theft operations and connect her to multiple suspicious deaths during police activities and law enforcement meetings affecting federal oversight and police law enforcement cooperation. Special Agent Rodriguez, I think there may be some misunderstanding about complex criminal investigations and the unfortunate reality that police personnel sometimes experience operational hazards despite advanced safety protocols and federal coordination measures, Victoria said, while discreetly activating a concealed emergency communication device that would summon corrupt police officers who were part of her theft network for emergency elimination of federal law enforcement threats. Perhaps we could discuss these concerns in our evidence storage facility, where I can demonstrate the investigation procedures that might explain these tragic police incidents. Criminal investigations involve dangerous evidence operations that might appear suspicious to those unfamiliar with organized crime, criminal coordination, and evidence theft affecting law enforcement operations. Special Agent Rodriguez agreed to examine Victoria's investigation procedures, not realizing that the detective was leading her to a secure facility where previous murders had been committed and where Victoria planned to coordinate her elimination using organized crime assets, while staging the scene as federal agent targeting that occurred during police corruption investigation, providing cover for her elimination while appearing to be criminal retaliation rather than deliberate murder by a detective protecting her evidence theft operations. But Victoria's carefully planned murder of the federal agent was about to be prevented by the unexpected arrival of internal affairs officers who had been investigating police corruption and had identified connections to her systematic theft activities affecting law enforcement operations and criminal justice programs. Internal Affairs. Inspector Michael Torres had been conducting comprehensive investigation into police corruption and evidence theft that exploited detective authority to facilitate organized crime coordination and eliminate potential witnesses to law enforcement crimes affecting police oversight and federal law enforcement cooperation. Inspector Torres specialized in investigating police crimes and had developed expertise in tracking law enforcement operations that compromised criminal justice integrity while conducting systematic elimination of threats to evidence theft operations affecting police credibility and law enforcement operational security. The internal affairs investigation had been initiated by reports from multiple police oversight agencies and law enforcement integrity organizations who noticed patterns of suspicious evidence handling and police personnel deaths, suggesting organized crime networks were infiltrating police departments to facilitate evidence theft while eliminating witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as police accidents. Detective Victoria Kane, I'm Inspector Torres with Internal Affairs, he announced as he entered the evidence facility where Victoria was coordinating Special Agent Rodriguez's elimination. I have departmental warrants for your investigation on charges of systematic evidence theft, police corruption, criminal conspiracy, and multiple counts of first-degree murder related to your exploitation of detective authority for criminal operations, affecting law enforcement integrity and criminal justice. Victoria's reaction to the internal affairs intervention was desperate attempts to maintain her law enforcement credibility. as she realized that federal agents and police investigators had been investigating her theft activities and connected them to systematic police personnel murders and criminal coordination affecting law enforcement operations. Special Agent Rodriguez looked stunned as she realized how close she had come to being murdered by the detective she was investigating for police corruption. Her law enforcement investigation had not only exposed Victoria's theft and murder operation, but also prevented her own death at hands of a killer using police authority as cover for systematic elimination of federal agents and corruption investigation threats. The comprehensive investigation that followed Victoria's arrest revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise and sophisticated methods she had developed to exploit detective authority for systematic evidence theft and murder. Forensic analysis of Victoria's police operations revealed extensive evidence of her theft activities, including sophisticated evidence removal equipment for criminal coordination procedures, detailed records of stolen police evidence worth millions, and comprehensive files containing criminal case information that had been sold to organized crime organizations affecting law enforcement oversight and criminal justice integrity. The investigation uncovered Victoria's connections to organized crime families who had been coordinating police department infiltration and evidence theft operations while using her detective access to steal evidence and eliminate witnesses through sophisticated methods disguised as police accidents and law enforcement operational hazards affecting police personnel and federal investigators. Most disturbing was discovery of Victoria's detailed knowledge of law enforcement systems and evidence theft coordination procedures, which she had used to develop increasingly sophisticated approaches for stealing police evidence while eliminating police personnel who discovered her criminal operations or threatened to expose her organized crime coordination activities affecting criminal justice integrity and law enforcement security. Detective Victoria Kane was ultimately convicted of 11 counts of first-degree murder, systematic evidence theft, police corruption, criminal conspiracy, conspiracy with organized crime, and numerous other charges related to her exploitation of detective authority for criminal operations affecting law enforcement integrity and criminal justice. The conviction sent unprecedented shockwaves throughout Chicago Police Department, prompting immediate reforms in police oversight, evidence monitoring, and detective addiction prevention measures designed to protect law enforcement integrity from exploitation by corrupted police officials involved in organized criminal activities. Several other detectives and police officials were investigated for similar criminal activities, resulting in enhanced oversight of police operations and new requirements for evidence verification, criminal justice monitoring, and federal cooperation measures, making it difficult for organized crime networks to exploit detective authority for systematic evidence theft operations. Special Agent Rodriguez and Inspector Torres received recognition for their collaborative investigation and became specialists in police crime investigation, developing new techniques for identifying evidence theft operations and protecting law enforcement integrity from exploitation by corrupted police officials. Sergeant James Martinez and other surviving police personnel required extensive psychological counseling and career rehabilitation to overcome trauma of learning that their trusted detective had been systematically stealing evidence and murdering police officers while exploiting her authority for organized crime activities. The case prompted comprehensive changes in police regulation, including mandatory federal oversight and addiction screening for detectives with evidence authority, enhanced monitoring of police operations and evidence procedures, real-time federal supervision of criminal investigations, and new reporting procedures for suspicious police activities involving criminal justice violations. Victoria's conviction led to increased cooperation between police oversight agencies and federal organizations investigating organized crime, with new protocols designed to identify law enforcement systems that might be exploited for systematic criminal activities while eliminating witnesses to police corruption and criminal justice violations. 5 years after Victoria's conviction and life imprisonment, Chicago Police Department continued implementing safeguards designed to protect law enforcement integrity from detectives who might abuse their positions for criminal purposes, affecting criminal justice and federal oversight. The detective who had promised to protect public safety and maintain law enforcement integrity had instead used her police authority to commit systematic evidence theft and murder while exploiting law enforcement resources for organized crime coordination, threatening foundations of criminal justice and police credibility. Detective Victoria Kane's final case had been permanently closed by comprehensive investigation of police and federal justice, where she would serve multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, proving that even law enforcement officials who attempted to exploit their detective authority for criminal gain could be identified, investigated, and brought to justice when dedicated federal agencies worked together to protect criminal justice from predatory police corruption. The detective's final case had concluded with her permanent removal from law enforcement service, serving as a lasting reminder that those entrusted with criminal justice must never abuse that sacred responsibility, and that police officials who would exploit public trust and law enforcement authority for criminal gain will ultimately face full consequences of their betrayal of police integrity and criminal justice. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.